Welcome to the MMIA podcast. My name's Joanne Avison, and I'm with my lovely friend and colleague, Paul Thornley.
Hi,
Paul.
Joanne. Are you doing good?
I'm doing great. You sound very rumbly.
Bring my sexy, rough voice to the table today. The temperature's changed dramatically here in the Middle East. It's now in the mid-40s outside. So that means it's like living in a sauna. But then you come into your house and then we have to go into the fridge. So it's this constant temperature change. It's had a bit of a Mickey on my throat. So bear with me.
All right, then. Well, in this episode, because as you know, because you're a contributing author, I've just received the proofs of Myofascial Magic in Action book.
Oh, exciting.
It is very exciting. And as you know, and it's a real fun thing to share with our listeners, the book is divided into the history, the mystery, the magic, and the 5 R's of myofascial magic. And one of the things that we get asked about a lot, and before we go into it, I was going to read a little bit out of one of the sections just to comment on, because we get asked an awful lot, what's the science behind this? And is it evidence-based? And, you know, the new church of science that everybody kind of throws around, but I know I see pieces of research that people don't really understand. The research is only as good as the questions that are asked behind it. And if you're doing a piece of research that assumes the human body is a linear architecture with joints such as levers at the elbows and the shoulders and all the other folds, the trouble with that is that the very premise upon which the questions are based is the premise that we are delighted to be at the leading edge of the world of fascia that is challenging that belief. And it's pretty threatening. And we're not the first in history to challenge an accepted modus operandi, nor will we be the last, hopefully. And no doubt our grandchildren will demonstrate how wrong we are now. But we know there are no levers in nonlinear biologic forms, which means we have to go looking to work out how we do move, because movement is our sign of life. So what do you say to people when they ask you for the evidence-based research behind what you're saying?
Well, it's a very, very common question, right? Because if we're right, then somebody must be very wrong.
Well, I don't live in that world of polarity, but yes, I guess that's why they feel.
That's what I mean, right? We are threatening the status quo, the classical accepted understanding. Bear in mind, science has been wrong many times, and it will continue.
Well, let's go back to Copernicus, and when Galileo upheld Copernicus' theory that we are in a heliocentric galaxy in which the sun is at the center, as distinct from a geocentric galaxy, which was believed back in the 1600s that the Earth was at the center of the galaxy, he was put under house arrest.
Well, the difference is, though, Joanne, then you would lose your life over challenging the status quo, and now you just lose credibility or your reputation, and people are holding on to it for dear life. However, how I approach it, I don't try to change people's mind. I absolutely don't. What I choose to do is explain how I have brought clarity to my own explanation, how I attained my information. And if that, for some reason, rattle their foundations a little, and they choose to reflect on their own opinion, and then maybe come and explore where I learned this information from, then there's an open invitation to have a further conversation.
And not to mention squid loads of research to back it up. So let's just say that.
We're not making this up, unless the people I've learned off have made it up completely because they fooled me. Because I totally bought into the fact that we're organic. I totally believe that I'm a living structure, like the mouse that is outside or a dog that I see. I think I'm exactly the same. And if I'm wrong, then I hold my hands up and say, I apologize. I really didn't believe I was a robot. I don't think I was mechanical.
I'm right with you. I am right with you because, you know, I mean, I was the daughter of an engineer. I was married to an engineer. I gave birth to an archetypal engineer. Engineering's around me all the time. And you know what a maverick monkey I am when somebody says you're biomechanical and that you're made of levers. And I struggled for years to identify first, second and third class levers and learn all that biomechanics. And I was just, there was a a psychosomatic, psyche means soul. There was a soul level of this cannot be right about it for me. And I remember having the mickey taken out of me. I won't name names, but I've had fingers pointed at me in private, in public, as in, what are you talking about? You don't know what you're on about. I can't even tell you. And I remember one of my teachers just saying, just because there's nerves in the fascia doesn't make it sensory. And I'm like, do you really think that I would say that without doing my homework? Do you think I would do less than go to the world's leading researchers and stand in conference halls with them one-to-one and ask them questions and write down their answers before gently saying in reply to a statement, I love the idea of anatomy as having a relationship to a sensory architecture that makes sense of who we are as beings? Do you think I would write that if I hadn't done any homework? Are you kidding me? I mean, Peter Hojing was one of the early researchers that created the International Fascia Research Congress. And it's thanks to him that we all met Jaap van der Waal in 2009 in Amsterdam. And thank God for that. And I remember standing there with Peter saying, please, would you explain to me how nerves give information and how fascia gives information? And I mean, it was a very naive question back then. I didn't know what I was asking even, but what's this different? What are these discrepancies? And I had a whole list of them. And he just looked at me and he said, my dear, imagine a citadel. And imagine there's a queen in the citadel, in the castle, within the citadel, in the operating room, at the top of everything, who has the last word on everything. And I went, yeah. And he said, and imagine there's all sorts of levels of trade and civil engineering and different people that have to live throughout the citadel. And there's gatekeepers all around the outside of the citadel. And I said, yes. He said, and one of the gatekeepers forgets their lunch. I said, yeah. I loved it. I mean, you know me in a story. And he said, so imagine one of the gatekeepers has forgotten their lunch. Do you think they should need to go all the way up through the central system of information gathering and questioning and asking to get to the very top, to get the answer, to come back down again, to get permission? They'd have died of hunger by the time it's worked out. So I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, what would actually happen is one of the gatekeepers would send a message outside the gates to somebody who could go home to his family and ask them to bring him some lunch because he left it on the table. So it wouldn't need to go through the central system to the queen of the citadel. And I love it when I meet a scientist and a man as clever as Dr. Hojing that can explain it to a 5-year-old. And he said, so what we're talking about is a system that actually honours both, that sends somebody out locally to deal with something in the immediate vicinity, or that can be done at, if you like, a lower level within the hierarchy, because there is a hierarchy, and doesn't involve the whole thing going through to the central brain. And then he looked at me, and I've nearly finished this story, but this was so beautiful. He said to me, my dear, have you ever heard the sound of a neuron firing? And I looked at him and I said, I suppose I'm listening to that all the time, but I don't know, because I don't know that I have. And he said, well, that's a very good answer, but actually, if you had heard the sound of a neuron firing, you'd be staggered how loud it is. And he said, so if a neuron had to fire every single message going through your body all the way up to your brain and back to the queen at the top of the citadel, you would literally, I think he said, die in the cacophony. You couldn't stand the noise. So we have to have a volume control for the different aspects of the operation. And your body does that through the fascial matrix. And I just publicly, if anyone knows Peter Hojing and he listens to this, I just want to say thank you, because it was one of the most magical moments outside the formal program in my world. And it changed it.
Well, so isn't it that very thing where you meet those people because you're looking for inspiration to why you have these questions in your head at all? And when if you're not looking, you would never heard of him. You would never have stood there and embraced that story and that explanation that has sat so beautifully with you, because you would have just dismissed it.
It motivated me to write Yoga, Fascia, Anatomy and Movement. And of course, I devoted myself to the research and translating the research. And I know it's got the word yoga on it, but anyone out there, whether you do yoga or not, it is the story of how fascia research has evolved over the years and the questions that it raises. And of course, I'm so thrilled that it went to second edition, because then I was able to update it and upgrade it to more recent research. And that's where all the backup referencing is. But in this book, and you've worked on it with me, and I thank you so much for that, we're now in a position years on. Please don't imagine this book came out of an idea that I had at a bus stop that I just wrote. This one is after 20 years.
It's a labor of love. Oh my God.
Right? And it's 20 years of taking all that research and then translating it into practice.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share a little piece of it with you and then see if it gets you going, because I love it when you say the human body isn't designed for a lot of exercise protocols. And I think this isn't to make anything wrong. I really want to emphasize that. I don't live in a world of polarity. I live in a world where same and different coexist and work together. And because of my absolute devotion to Fasciategrity, which is the management of three forces at all times, three forces, third force, the holy trinity of movement, you can't just have one thing or the other thing. It's not enough. That's a linear belief. The pendulum swings from left to right, from right to wrong, from up to down, from good to bad. That we don't live there. And I think we're in danger of thinking that's the truth. If you imagine the top of the pendulum, it forms a triangle with any pendulum swing. And that's the basis of so much ancient wisdom and the basis upon which the human body moves, that it forces us into a world of appreciating that, yes, that's true, and same, both neither, either, or, when it is. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. But what I think can be a super value is recognizing the history that brought us to the way that we're thinking, because it gives us context.
It's all about context.
It's all about context, and it's all about metaphors. And the truth is, the machine is a metaphor. It's the wrong metaphor for the living human body, because we're made of soft matter and machines are made of hard matter. Just saying. And that's so great, big, huge. It actually ends the discussion, but never mind. And what I want to do is read a little bit that John Sharkey gave me this link, and I explored it, and it's called The Magic Duck. I just want to read this little bit out of Myofascial Magic in Action, the book. So The Magic Duck, and there's a picture of it. In 1738, about a century after Descartes lived, a French artist and inventor named Jacques de Vaucanson invented some remarkable artifacts. For example, Vaucanson invented the lathe, which became very important in the Industrial Revolution. However, he is most famous for fabricating a mechanical duck that appeared to behave like a real one when he was only 29 years old. The mechanical duck was made to quack, drink water, eat grain, and appear to digest and defecate the grain. Described as an automaton, it was a remarkable feat of invention and engineering, especially when you consider the date it was designed. It was quite literally beyond belief in that era. Now, to call it an automaton, we have to understand what autos means. The Latin word autos means self, so an automaton described a self-motivated item, something we might now describe as a kind of robot. It didn't need a human hand to move it. Now, Descartes, by this time, had described humans as moving by a system of counterweights and wheels like any other automaton, such as a clock that ticked alone once it was wound up. This was the theme of that era. The idea of being able to automate things was to progress by the creation of man-made artifacts. The creator, in inverted commas, became the human who managed the feat. And regarding this duck-like mechanism in the context of the time or era it was invented in helps us to see how remarkable it was in the early 18th century. So just to put this invention into context, the exceptional craftsmanship of this mechanical bird automaton in 1738 was in an era of horse-drawn carriages and almost a century earlier than even the invention of the telegraph. The telegraph preceded the invention of the telephone in 1876, the first car in 1886, and the radio in 1895. Electricity wasn't introduced to homes in England until the late 1800s, in the Victorian times. So this remarkable duck, in the context of its time, wasn't necessarily thought of as a model, such that there was a distinction of mechanism. It was as if in his day, Vaucanson had mastered nature itself. The duck was designed by daylight and candlelight. There was no such thing as a light switch in 1738. In the context of its own era, it was magical and mystical, like nature itself, that appeared to have been reinvented. And at that time, it was as much of a deal as the idea of virtual reality today to those that knew of it. The mechanized bird was so impressive in 1738 in the ability to mimic a bird-like function and motion. There were about 4,000 individual parts in the mechanical duck, that perhaps it was taken as something of a proof that nature is based upon mechanical parts. This form of automation in a man-made object was beyond most people's comprehension. There was hardly any reference for it at all, and machines of any sort were not that commonplace. Perhaps in the 18th century it implied that humans could somehow conquer nature. The duck had zero natural intelligence. It cannot and must not be considered real. It only mimicked the appearance of a duck. It was like a duck. That didn't mean it was a duck. Humans in the 18th century were as spellbound then as humans in the 21st century are intrigued by artificial intelligence now. So there's lots more where that came from. But what I wanted to do was show how this foundation of building mechanical things, and there's loads more history that's listed and described in the book, leads us to the origins of our mechanical-based movement protocols in the West. They're not universal by any means. And why we do them. It's like we've forgotten that we didn't create nature. Nature created us.
But we don't honor nature. We honor society. You have to fit in. You have to mimic and join the party. That is the flavor of the day. And that is the health and fitness industry, which is supported by the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And of course, then your surgical is the other end of it. And it's all based around that same mythical duck. That if a part of the duck is broken, let's fix the part. Let's train the leg day, the bum day, the ab day, the arm day, the shoulder day, the back day.
Whatever day, yeah.
Whatever day you're going to allocate to a part of you. And then you'll have your integration of everything. But that's not how humans move. It might be how the mechanical duck can move. But then that requires a mechanic to remove everything else and just focus on that one element of it, reintegrate it into the wholeness of the mechanical duck and see if it still works. But humans always work. We don't know how to not move until you're dead. The only time you find movement challenging is when itself feels threatened by the way you're using it, and you're not using it efficiently, and you're compromising the efficiency of itself and its self-defend. And then it brings everything to a screeching halt and lets you know, hey, you're not paying attention to me. You're abusing me. And sometimes that's necessary, right? If you've got a sporting achievement to attain, you have to go through the mill. You've got to go through the torture to achieve these optimal outcomes with this amazing body. But there's a price to pay. If you're going to join the military, There's a price to pay. We're young and we're vulnerable, but we're unbreakable at first. But that's not true, because I was broke at 16, right? But the point is that you're expendable. It's an expendable commodity, people. Well, we are like the mechanical duct being filtered through until once that's broken, we'll make another one. We'll provide another mechanical duct to perform the next task. But unfortunately, that's not what we all are. The vast majority of us are not trying to meet somebody else's expectation. We want to live our own lives with our own uniqueness. But our only avenue for health and fitness is a place that wants to turn us into the mechanical duct. They will measure us and make sure that we're symmetrical. They'll identify dysfunctions and try to address it to make it more organized and more linear orientated, so it can provide forces like a lift, like a hydraulic platform, like a weight machine. But they take away the unique organic nature that your body's formed itself over many years of playing and experiencing different activities.
And self-organizing. This is the key. I mean, Jaap van der Waal, and I was so lucky to count him as such a dear friend and have him help me basically write what I've written. And I remember him saying to me very, very early on in my career, in writing about fascia, I mean, not in my career as a yoga teacher, I was already established in that. But when I wrote Yoga, Fascia, Anatomy and Movement, Jaap was just so generous with his time and his commitment. And one of the things he wrote, and I quoted the email he wrote me with his permission, and it basically was, just because it acts like a lever doesn't mean it is a lever. And then the other thing is the absolute keystone of his teaching in embryology is that we self-organize and we form our parts. We are not put together as parts. And as I've always said, at no point did your mother take you into hospital for a limb bolt-on procedure or a feature insertion procedure or an activation of your nervous system procedure. It just didn't. You self-organize. I mean, by the time your mother knows she's pregnant, within a month of that, you are whole and complete. You've gone from a unicellular being to a whole and complete multicellular being. You are a whole and complete unicellular being. You become a whole and complete multicellular being in the round, in 361 degrees of wholeness at all times. Whatever your wholeness is. You know, some people are born without 5 fingers on each hand, or a thumb and 4 fingers on each hand, or 5 toes on each foot, but they're still whole and complete as themselves. There's nothing wrong necessarily. It might not be what the majority is, but that to me doesn't make it wrong.
There will
but
never
it's still
be,
whole.
But there will never be another you. You are
It's unique.
not mimicking something that ever was. You are 100% unique. The chances of us existing at all were already a miracle. It's just we're so lucky. So when I say in my statement, and the reason we ask all of these questions is like, why do we care? Why have you bothered writing all these bloody books and spending so many years questioning the research to translate it into what? Why bother? Well, why bother? Because the most people we see are suffering. They're not conforming to the mechanical duck approach. They're not. They're really enduring discomfort, and it's limiting their lifestyles and their ability to thrive with their families and in their occupation because they're being told to conform like the bloody duck. So when
they're also not enjoying their longevity. They're not up. They're not moving happily in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s.
Well, they've lost the longevity of choice because the choice has been taken away from them because they conform to somebody else's interpretation of choice. You must conform to this. You must do this day, this way, this approach. And it's okay.
You can't tell them. Well, we can't tell our sons, Paul.
Correct. So my statement is humans are not designed to exercise, and exercise cannot be medicine if it requires medical attention because of the way you did the exercise. This is bonkers. People in our own uniqueness are designed to move incredibly. We can do the most phenomenal things with our bodies, like all creatures in nature are all specifically grown and self-organized to perform the most remarkable things and integrate together in a brilliant world that we live upon. However, our bodies are not designed to do repetitive action. So often, that wears us out. It wears out this self-organizing organism, so it becomes inefficient in this attainment of aesthetics. We have to look a certain way, perform a certain way, endure a certain way, be uncomfortable so friggin' often. And we've lost the joy of movement. Now, if your joy of movement is to be tortured, I mean, hey, we have to fill everybody's boat, right? If you like that sort of discomfort, then good, go fill your boots. However, there's a consequence to your living tissue when you ask it to perform like your mechanical duck, because your body is not designed in a symmetrical fashion. It is very uniquely asymmetrical, and it's meant to move in this lovely spiraling motion that embraces counter rotations and spring. But everything in the medical and fitness world is about taking you, creating the duck formation, yes, and taking out a part of it and reintegrating it once you've mastered it, or taking it so that we make sure everything is the same. So you have as much weight on one side as you do on the other. Who says you have to 50-50 on both feet? Why? When you walk outside, we all lead with one leg. You always will lead with one leg your whole life. You can try to train and come on the other side, and you may be competent to do it, but it will never be 50-50 because you are not the duck. You are a beautiful human being that has the capacity to do 1,000 things with your body as long as you're allowed to explore them. And this is so important to our world, so because we can enjoy these bodies we have, we only get one of them, that you're encouraging yourself to explore what it can do, but not take it to the limits of what it will stop you doing, unless you have a specific goal in mind to torture yourself. And that's your choice. It's your body. Feel free to stretch it like your spaghetti, climb massive peaks, put yourself in extreme temperatures, do extreme endurance events, do what you wish, but at least recognize the consequences on your tissue and make sure you're preparing for them. You're anticipating them. And then we're ready to help you. Not once have I said, don't move, ever. Movement is great. It should be amazing. You should explore movement every single day. But do it based on you, rather than a program or protocols of somebody that wants to turn you into your mechanical duck.
Well, it's funny you say that. We spoke about this in our live coaching call this week, but I've just been in a course, and for different reasons, I had to sit at a desk for 2 days and then sit in a chair in a conference style room for 2 days. And, I knew I was going a bit nutty because I hadn't moved enough. So just the most basic thing, having a very low inflated ball just between me and the back of the chair so that I could basically fidget. And oh my goodness, thank heaven I carry it with me everywhere. And I had it under my elbow, or I had it under my foot, or I had it in my back. And I was just being this absolute, nobody wanted to sit next to me. I went and sat around behind a pillar so that I could fidget and enjoy myself. And it was, oh my goodness, it was such a relief to know that those micro movements were making such a difference to me. And I didn't have that sort of aching, oh my God, if I have to sit in this chair one more minute, I think I'm going to go insane. Because I was making a game of it in this very, very low key, like whisper the whole time. And I don't know what it is about the work we're doing, but it's so forgiving, and it so allows us to just be the way we are, and it's kind. All about such honest movement. It's so kind.
It's kind to yourself.
It is. But it's more than that. It's not kind to yourself as in lie there and pour yourself a glass of wine and just chill out and don't do anything. It's kind in a way that seems to feed the energy body with a sort of, it's okay, regardless of the research, regardless of the so-called science papers, regardless of all the facts and figures. In fact, you're not a quantifiable mechanical thing or biomechanical thing. You're actually an unquantifiable, qualifiable,
yes.
Qualia, those qualities of, oh, thank goodness. I can't even tell you, just having that ball between my shoulder blades and just wiggling around like that. As I say, I had to do it to the side of the room because people were getting cross that the person in front of them was fidgeting, but I didn't care. Or I stood right at the side of the room and just wiggled one foot, and you'd have been proud of me just seeing how long I could bounce from one foot to the other. I don't need you to be proud of me. I was feeding my body with these little micro doses of It was actually relaxation.
But
and
your
it meant I
tissue
wasn't tearing my hair out.
But it should be relaxing and being nourished while you're moving.
Exactly.
Subtly.
Exactly.
Like, it's a nourishment. Otherwise, it's just knackering. Life is tiring enough as it is, right? So it's this subtle nourishment. So it's always been invigorated. So it's always responsive. So there's a time frame to it. So if you need to jump up and be alert and interact with your presenter, you can. You're not falling asleep because you're so tired. You're able to keep yourself stimulated.
I was like on it the whole time. Absolutely.
So it extends your longevity of the day. So you can go and rest properly later, not collapse over the fatiguing nature of trying to sit up all day and sit still or collapse. Because collapsing is as exhausting as sitting up because your body gets absolutely shattered. I had a client the other day, and she's really hooked on what we do. And we were talking about this bridging. We spoke about it with our guys, where we don't bridge like Jane Fonda anymore. We're thrusting our bum in the air. And it's okay, people like thrusting, go and thrust away. It's amazing activity. But we don't want to make sure we do it to such a rigidly positioned lower back where you've got this excessive curvature. Anyway, so I was showing her the articulative approach where she can still do the same motion, but it's much more subtle. And your body embraces it.
Feeds the body rather than starving.
Rather than attacks it. So she goes to a local, the great circuit class that they do. And she goes there because she likes it. She likes the sweating, she likes the music, she likes the circuit factor of it. But what she was doing on this machine, the hip thruster thing, where they put a bar across them, they're resting their shoulders higher, like on a bench, and you're meant to thrust this bar in the air. And you've got this weight on you. And the weights can be considerable. They can be really heavy, or they can be quite subtle. But the weights they wanted them to do were really heavy. And she went, I'm going to try what I learned in the class the other day. So she lessened the weight, but stayed in the same time frame of the circuit, but was performing this rolling articulation to create the hip extension rather than just thrusting up and down. And she said, this instructor came on and said, you're doing it wrong. She went, what do you mean? She said, I want you to put all this weight back on a thrust. You must thrust to get that sensation. She went, I promise you, my ass is on fire and I've got less weight than I've ever lifted. But I'm doing it in a way that I've just learned in another environment, another class, and I really like it, and my body loves it. I don't leave this class in any discomfort. My back doesn't feel like I've attacked it, and my arse feels magnificent, and I don't have anywhere near the excessive weight you've been asking me to thrust for weeks. So let me do it this way, and don't get so upset. Just make sure that I'm safe. Rather than tell me I'm doing it wrong, I must do this aggressive thrusting, where my spine is locked and immobilized and I'm forcing my butt to the ceiling. And she really defended it because she said, Paul, I was so grateful that I'd had another approach because I like the session, but my body hurts after it. And when I've been in my sessions, now she's been coming to me for a few weeks, she's like, Paul, I can't believe the difference. You really work me hard. You work me very hard. And I make sure they're organized and they're challenged every moment they're in the room. They have to be present and interactive with themselves. And I'm just guiding the experience, but I don't let them stop. It's like your body is never stopping. I'm just harmonizing like the orchestra. So there's always playing the tune just at the right frequency at the right time. You know, we change the tone up and down, but there's no break. The eloquence is within the transitions. It's constantly motioning. And she says, Paul, my body feels amazing. And I can't explain why it's happening. I don't know how you're doing it. And I tell my friends, please come to this class. I don't know what it does or how it does it, but it's the best thing I've ever done. And what she was so pleased with is that she's able to take it, and because I said you should do this, and take it with you into your life and your other environments. This is not a modality that's just for this room. This is a way of moving living tissue in any environment. And that's the beauty of it. We're not teaching you to do a modality. We're reminding you of what you are, what you're made of, and how you're in charge of those ingredients and how they react to your performance in whatever environment you're asking you to do it. And that there's a natural recovery, there's a natural stimulation, there's a natural organization, there's a natural boundary, and your body will inform you and you'll listen to it in a much cleverer way. You're more aware of what it's telling you and why it's saying it in whatever language and sensation it's feeding you, and you respond properly in a way that you're managed. Like you drive your car. If you just sit there, drive it linearly, and you never move your arms, you only push this way, you'll crash. You have to be constantly responding to the energy of the floor, the engine, the car, the wheel, other traffic, weather, distractions, the radio. There's 1,000 things that you're trying to manage, and you're only trying to go from A to B. Well, we're not the car. We're way more advanced than any car. And it's important that we know how to interpret the information our body is giving us in a timely fashion, because you cannot ask your brain for permission to act. It's too late. You must recognize these sensory feedbacks your whole body is giving you. Like you get a shiver down your back. You don't ask your brain what you're doing. You just know you feel comfortable. And it was so rewarding to get that type of feedback from somebody who has no idea what we're doing, but she's just enjoying the journey, and that we've now introduced it to her as another option. Because what is myofascial finesse? That's what it's called. And it's of course they call it in a Pilates studio, myofascial Pilates, but I keep pushing this word, myofascial finesse. And she said, what is that? And I said, well, we are myofascial. That's our architectural tissue. It's a relationship of muscles and fascia. They work together. Yes? And we understand it really well, but we just call it that for now. But how you use that fabric is with finesse. And finesse doesn't mean soft. Finesse doesn't mean hard. It means appropriately for whatever you're asking it to do. Like Batman needs his outfit on to be Batman, but he also needs a suit when he wants to just be the dude in the mansion entertaining his guests. He's still the same person, but he's asking his fabric to reflect what action he needs to perform, but not suffer because of it. He should be rewarded. That is the ability to change how much finesse is able to recruit and access. And it's just been, I love this. I love this whole journey, because we are influencing so many people, and we're not doing it for clickbaits, and we're not doing it just to annoy people. We're doing it because people deserve to know who they can be based on what they understand themselves to be made of, rather than following the mechanical duck blindly and assuming some person that keeps saying, I'm going to fix your biomechanics, because they think they're a body mechanic. And they don't even understand what's under the skin. That's like going to a mechanic with your car, and he only knows how to buff the window and change your tires. He's got no idea of the intricate nature of what lies beneath the fabric of the car and how it all must integrate, and why one thing is overloading something else and why it then breaks. And thankfully, we've spent decades in the lab being invited in to see the historical nature of living tissue and how it's formed over decades. And we get to see the transformation of how somebody utilized their fabric. And then that gives us this heads up. It gives us hindsight, so we can really help people prepare for their own longevity of choice. And I think it's such a rewarding job. That's why I love being outside of that herd mentality, where if you want to do biomechanics, good luck. It's right there for you. It's there to help everybody conform and feel safe. But over here is a much more intelligent way of looking at your longevity and how you can respect and honor your own nutritious, beautiful self.
Exactly. And what I was going to say was the whole point of this is that because you're tuning in, and I when I was asked what does MMIA stand for, I was saying the movement of magical inner awareness. It's literally understanding your body's language, in its language, in its dialect. And when you speak that honestly, it's not that anyone is wrong for any movement modality. It's universal. So when we talk about, I sometimes meet people say, well, I'm a hatha yoga. Well, I teach vinyasa flow. Well, I teach ashtanga. Or I did this Pilates. And people identify with these modalities as if they're the be all and the end all of the world. And the truth is, common to everything, we are humans being in motion. That's the mark of life. And what I think the magic of the movement of inner awareness is this awareness of the subtle micro movements that you can add. And we teach it in a very ordered sequence for very good reason, because it builds naturally and it creeps up on you. But like the client you were talking about, the what do they say? The taste is in the result of the dish. It's like you end up being a master chef who can make the dish that person will love the most, because you've got an understanding of the flavors that just, one man's meat is another man's poison, and you can adapt to what they want, but you become a master chef at it. You're not just taking a recipe, following the recipe and producing the result of the recipe. For me,
this is the crux of it all. And you can apply this to anything, any activity or skill. If I'm allowed to drive badly, I'm going to crash a lot. I'm going to endanger myself and other people. If I'm allowed to cook terribly for my family or my friends, firstly, they'll stop coming around and stop asking me to cook, because my food is horrible, doesn't have the flavors and taste. but I keep being complimented on doing a bad job, but they keep trying to reward me and praise me to say thank you. And it's the same with movement. Poor approaches to movement, where you don't understand the consequences of your approach, results in really negative influences on your living tissue and its ability to move efficiently and recover from it. And it's really important that the people sharing this understand that, because otherwise, to say any movement is better, even negative movement is better than no movement, because the health benefits outweigh the negative effects of that movement, makes no sense whatsoever. Because it is a sense of, let's ignore the effects because there's a bigger goal to go to. And I think it's really the responsibilities on the educators to educate the population that are coming and really honor what you're asking people to do. I know that word upsets people, but it's not to upset people, it's to make people pay attention to the intellectual property that we've learned. We've learned this information properly.
Well, it's not an intellectual process, and I think this is one of the problems, Paul. We have an intellectual intelligence,
yes.
we have an instinctive intelligence,
yes.
and we have an intuitive intelligence.
Correct.
Let's say there's more than that, but let's just say those three things. And our intellectual intelligence is based in history books of academic quantitative data.
And data.
That says this does this and this does this and this is because of this, which is all very interesting. But movement is actually not an intellectual process.
No, yes.
It's an instinctive process. We're born moving. If we're not in motion, it's a sign of danger in utero. And if something doesn't move or doesn't move healthily, there are consequences to that. And it's an instinctive thing. And one of the reasons it's instinctive, in humans, we're not born walking.
That's
like
right.
Most animals are born, they've got to get in action immediately. A fish has to swim at birth.
Yep.
A frog, okay, frog's a tadpole, but it has to swim at birth and then it grows its legs later. We start off swimming, but we're born into a gravity-based environment.
Yes.
So we have to learn to walk. So it's almost like we're not quite cooked when we're born. We spend a year finding our way into walking. And of course, I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand that our anatomy isn't fully at the hardened end of the scale of soft matter. The bones are not fully formed until the pressure has been put through them by walking.
Yes.
So the pelvis isn't a complete as it can be until the child is a young child that's run around a lot and moved around a lot and so on. And it's a developing, growing process. Jaap van der Waal says we're embryos every day.
Correct.
At this stage, which I love.
Yes.
But I think one of the things that happens is we forget that instinctive movement is also influenced by our intuition, by the animus of our, let's call it our the spirit of us.
Yeah.
You know, when we're in the lab and we're looking at cadaveric specimens, spirit is present as missing.
Of course.
You know, spirit had the last word. It said bye. And on that moment of goodbye, it left that body in that state.
Yep.
Now, however it's been preserved affects how it appears to us, but spirit is present as missing. So it can't self-organize, it can't self-move. It's preserved in a moment of time, and if left, it will literally disintegrate in back dust to dust. And what I think is very difficult when we've grown up in a society that's becoming ever more dependent on intellectual criteria is that we've inherited this historical testing of the quantitative data, the strokes per length of the pool, the strides per mile on the track, the heart rate. You know, and what's so interesting to me is that heart rate variability is actually the goal, the ability to adjust and adapt and change.
Yes.
And yet we do movement protocols that aren't about adapt and change in the sense of respond differently each time and allow for the really honest movement. They're more about adapt and change to reach the goal.
Yeah.
And there's a price for that.
Of course.
And you and I have seen many, many elite athletes in and out of their careers in ages that are way too young to stop moving.
This is the point I mean. Humans, you can't help but respond instinctively and you feel intuitively. But the intellectual process of the tutor, the governor, the guider, the instructor, it's their limitation by their intellectual learning which overrides somebody's instinct or intuition because they try to make them conform. And they say you must have 50-50, you must be symmetrical, your arms must be in this position, you must push like this. And they hijack, if you like, we use this phrase a lot, don't we? That we're hijacking the natural, honest movement of each individual to conform to a system that doesn't serve them in the long term. So they're getting short-term gains, but they have to suffer long-term limitations, dysfunction, and inhibition, ultimately, to move freely. Otherwise, there would nobody be having surgery. You don't just get a bad back. You don't get a herniation. You don't just become incontinent. You don't just create some neurological issue. You create it, and it forms over many, many repetitions of poor, inappropriate, intellectually guided movements that is overriding the instinctive nature when you're performing them. And you can feel it. You know when you're being pushed too far. You know when you're being asked to conform. But it's hard for the general public to question it, because somebody's standing there with a qualification or their name on the T-shirt as the coach or whatever it is that's on their T-shirt, and we trust them.
Well, one of the difficulties is, and I've come across this a lot, is sometimes movement instructions are given on paper to somebody and handed to them.
Yes.
And there is no full explanation. There is no organization of it applying to that individual.
Correct.
It's as if the exercise, or the exercise, call it faction, is considered to be the thing that works. Well, it doesn't work. It doesn't work unless it's expressed through somebody.
Yes.
And that somebody that it's expressed through has an instinctive movement pattern, has an intuitive awareness of what's happening that day. It's why I use the word bioemotional, not biomechanical, because I'm talking about the motion and the emotion. We are emotional creatures.
We are absolutely.
We are energy in motion, and it's a fluid energy in motion, and it's constantly changing. And what I love about the client that you described, who learned that beautiful intuitive moving that you teach, I loved that. You taught me that process of how we move the spine when we're working those particular movements. But what you're looking out for that brings you out of the situation stronger and happier and lighter of foot and with a spring in your step. And there's no feeling of, oh my God, I've got to spend the next 2 hours getting over, or next 2 days getting over this post-DOMS or whatever. There isn't any. There's no need for it.
It's not
because
necessary.
It's not been put under stress.
No other creature in the world tries to perform till it's injured. It tries to avoid injury. Every animal on the planet tries to avoid injury, because it doesn't want to be injured, because then it's extinct. It will be eaten. It's in deep trouble, right?
Yeah.
We perform to these prescribed exercises for particular conditions that they're copy and pasting. My own mum is in agony in her back, and she showed me a thing. She said, "Paul, how am I meant to do these movements?" And the pictures from your classical therapist, pictures doing a swan dive. She's
just broken her hip.
I said, "Mum, you've got a broken hip," and she's in full, because she's a 72-year-old smoker for her whole life. Her head is right in front of her chest, like her boobs are down to her knees now. God bless her. She's absolutely gorgeous. I love my mum to bits, but there's no way in a million years she could lie on her belly and extend her spine. Like, why should she? But that was what she was told to do to help her back. And I went, "Ma'am, if they require you, by their assessment, to do extending motions, let's come up with something that's more applicable for you, that you can achieve." Because she was just going by the specialist, but her instinct says, "Paul, I can't do this." And I went, "You're absolutely right, ma'am. You can't do it. There's no way you would benefit from that instruction. So let's find another way. If they believe that targeting your body in a particular fashion will have a positive outcome, let's find another way, another opportunity to go into that area of the body and influence it that way, if we deem it appropriate." But this is across the world. They're being told to strengthen things that are weaker, rather than they're inhibited because something is more biased. That I'm left side dominant, so I need to train hard on my right side. It's just a misinterpretation of living tissue and how it naturally performs for them on a day-to-day basis. Because if we can make them conform to this symmetrical mechanical duct formation, then they're fixed. And that's just not true.
We've got a new distinction called duct formation, right?
Duct formation, that's it now. There you go. But it's a beautiful story that led us to this conversation. And it came from the 1700s, for God's sake. How amazing is that?
It is incredible, and it was an incredible achievement.
Yeah.
And thank God for all the machines that we use that have grown out of it.
Exactly.
I think my issue is just that we're not machines,
Yeah.
and we can't base how we move ourselves on mechanical principles. It's the wrong metaphor.
Not anymore, for surely, God.
Well, on that note, my very dear friend, speak soon.
Pleasure. Take care, Joanne.